pass.
Good afternoon. I would like to welcome you to the Tuesday, March 7th, 2023 meeting of the Tompkins County Legislature. It is 5:30, and if you could please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. The United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. If we could have a roll call of members, please.
Randy Brown. Randy Brown.
Here.
Amanda Champion.
Here.
Susan Curry.
Here.
Deborah Dawson.
Here.
Rich John.
Here.
Dan Klein.
Here.
Ann Corman.
Here.
Mike Lane.
Here.
Greg Mezzi.
Here.
Veronica Pillar.
Here.
Lee Shurtleff.
Here.
Mike Sigler.
Here.
Travis Brooks.
Here.
Shauna Black.
Here.
14 members present.
I wanted to welcome everyone here tonight. We do have standing room only, which is really great for us to see. Many of us are here to celebrate our friend and neighbor, Miss Carol Kamen, and I wanted to start off with a proclamation. Whereas, after 23 years of extraordinary service, Carol Kamen has announced her resignation as the historian of Tompkins County. And whereas the National Women's History Alliance has designated the 2023 theme for Women's History Month as celebrating women who tell our stories, and whereas Carol has devoted her adult life to researching, documenting, and communicating the rich history of Tompkins County, and especially to bringing the rightful prominence, the contribution of those often confined to the margins of history, women, people of color, indigenous people, immigrants, and those of lesser means and status. And whereas much of what is known about the history of Tompkins County is the result of the research and writings of Carol, as chronicled in editorials for the magazine History News, countless weekly columns in the Ithaca Journal, and over 20 books that are frequently used in classrooms throughout the United States as a lens on studying local history. And whereas Carol has nurtured multi-generational interest in the field of local history as an instructor at Tompkins Cortland Community College, Wells College, and Cornell University, and whereas, as the Tompkins County historian since 2000, Carol has guided the county legislature on matters relating to our history, while also promoting communication and collaboration among local town and village historians through the creation of the Municipal Historians of Tompkins County. And whereas, with Carol as chair and Tompkins County legislator Mike Lane as co-chair, the county's Civil War Commission honoring the war's I'm going to have a very hard time saying this. Michael Lane, can you help me out here?
Sesquicentennial.
Thank you. And the county, I could say this one, bicentennial. Houston Public School education right here. Created by the legislature, commemorated the 200th anniversary of the county's funding, and whereas, while serving as chair of the Tompkins County Historical Commission since its founding in 2018, Carol inspired, supported, and assisted in the publication of 8 new booklets that have explored a variety of subjects, the installation of building plaques commemorating individuals, events, and places associated with the women's suffrage movement, and signage along Cayuga streets in the indigenous Gayahono language and tribal colors. And whereas Carol worked with a small committee which was instrumental in the creation of 2 privately funded statues being created by renowned sculptor Meredith Bergman, recognizing 2 women, local housing activists and INHS founding board member Lucy Brown, and former Cornell professor and the nation's first woman cabinet secretary, Frances Perkins, to be placed in 2024. And whereas Carol's passion and gift for telling the story of those too often forgotten or marginalized was recently captured in her beautiful historical novel, Lamentations, which tells the story of the first group of families crossing west to Oregon in 1842 from the perspective of the dozen women on the trip. And whereas Carol's commitment to service has included participation on numerous nonprofit agency boards, chairing the Community Celebrations Committee of the Strategic Tourism Planning Board, and serving as a member of the Town of Lansing Planning Board. And whereas Carol's work has been widely recognized and respected, as evidenced in the many awards she has received, including the Regional Council of Historical Agencies Award of Merit, the Mary Washington College Center for Historic Preservation Award, the New York State Historian of the Year, and most recently, the Lehman Prize for Distinguished Service in New York History. And whereas, in the words of the President of the New York Academy of History, for more than a generation, Carol has set the standard for local, county, and state history in the United States. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Tompkins County Legislature does hereby proclaim the month of March 2023 as Carol K. Kamen Women's History Month in Tompkins County. Resolve further that Carol Kamen, who has spent her life educating us about our history, now becomes part of it. In witness whereof, I, Shauna Black, have herein to set my hand and cause to be affixed the Great Seal of Tompkins County, State of New York, on this 7th day of March 2023. Would you like to say a few words?
Oh, I didn't do it alone. I've had lots of help. There are a lot of good people who have helped. And the county board, the legislature, it was board when I started. County legislature has been nothing but supportive the entire time. And I thank you all. This is a great place to live, and all of you are family. Thank you very much.
Next on our agenda, we will have executive session this evening for two different topics. The first being collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law. The second is for the employment history of a particular person. Now we are going to move on to privilege of the floor for public. And if you would like to speak, please fill out one of our blue cards. It's located at the back table. We do have a few rules for speaking under privilege of the floor. First one is an individual may speak no longer than 3 minutes. A speaker will not raise their voice. A speaker will not use lewd, obscene, profane, slanderous, or libelous language, or speak or act in a manner that would tend to incite a breach of the peace. A speaker will not speak about county personnel matters. Personnel matters include comments about job performance of named county employees other than elected officials. After 3 minutes, a speaker will leave the microphone and yield the floor. Transferring time to another person is not permitted. Number 6, a person will not cause a disruption, and if asked to leave, will leave the chambers. Now on to our first speaker, Ms. Vivian Rose.
I just started my 3 minutes. My name is Vivian Rose. I'm a resident of Ulysses, town of Ulysses, and the village of Trumansburg. I wanted to speak to you as somebody who earned a PhD in women's history and museum studies from Binghamton University and then moved to Tompkins County. And also as somebody who grew up in a state that does not have municipal historians and does also not have as long and deep a reach into understanding the people who live there. Ever since I arrived here, Carol has been the example of how to be not only a local historian, but a national historian. And that is because I read her book when I was in graduate school about how to do local history. That book really does bring Tompkins County into every classroom. But more to the point, what it does is bring the idea that you belong to a country into every classroom, that we make this country and that we are responsible for it. Because we are the ones who, at the end of the day, provide the data for the brilliant historians who get the Pulitzers, et cetera, et cetera. We are the ones who make our country. And the other thing that Carol has done is open doors for people who otherwise might not have an open door. And by that I mean people who believe that the history that they have is important, that has not yet been represented. So I have been active in the last little while getting the village of Trumansburg and the town of Ulysses to pass resolutions in honor of Lydia Godfrey Sears, who wrote a history of Trumansburg that was published by herself privately in 1968. And so there are a variety of events in Ulysses and in Trumansburg because Carol opened the door for local municipalities to understand the importance of women and women's history in their lives. So it's not only that women have made history, it's not only that people of all of us have made history, but it's also that we hear each other, that we understand how we each make a contribution. Because there are things that we see from the places that we are in our society that call us to cry out for change and to cry out for something better for all of us. That's the power of history. That's the power that Carol has brought to her advising of you and of legislative bodies, of schools, of institutions like the local museum, which is a model throughout the U.S. And I wanted to let you know that because of Carol, more history is being made throughout the U.S. And I thank you for your support of her and for future historians going forward.
Next speaker is Brian Eden. You know what, that makes sense. I think we have one more person, Susan Holland.
Good evening. I'm Susan Holland. I'm from Historic Ithaca, and I'm not going to speak about the Red House. I'm going to speak about Carol. So I wanted to just thank Carol for her commitment to history and to Tompkins County, the state, nationally and internationally. I know I'm repeating what many of my colleagues have said out here, but her work really does bring everyone's history to the forefront and really wants us all at the table. I sit on the Tompkins County Historical Commission and share some other activities with Carol as well. My phone just went out. And her contributions cannot be understated. So at Historic Ithaca, we've had the great privilege of working with Carol over and over again, and we know that we'll continue to do so. I have personally learned so much from her, so thank you, Carol. I wanted to congratulate her on all of her accomplishments, and it's a great way, what you've done tonight is a great way to honor her and to work with her and to help us get some of those things off the ground for the commission. We really appreciate it, but all the other things that you did in the past with Carol and for the historians themselves. The municipal historians is also an important group. I don't think there's any in New York State that are collaborate together and have a regular meeting and share things, so it provides a great network for all of us. So I just wanted to congratulate Carol. I think it's a great way to honor her during Women's History Month, and thank you so much. And Carol, thanks.
Okay, let's see here. Next, we have Brian Eden.
Hi, thanks. So since I joined the EMC in about 2009, I was the energy chair. And in 2014, I started talking with municipal bodies about climate change. And, you know, I really didn't get much positive feedback for the 6 years that I did that. And so it's a conundrum, how to stimulate a sense of urgency without doom messaging. You know, I can talk about all the latest scientific studies and the feedback loops where we lose human agency to mitigate their impacts. But being explicit about these challenges that we face, does it turn folks off? Does it create a sense of paralysis? Yeah, I would like to be able to engage more people on this existential issue. And by proposing a declaration of a climate emergency, it actually is a climate emergency, but it's not recognized as such by most people. Then we could openly debate these issues. We could bring and put all the facts on the table. So all items in Resolution L that's right now is on the consent agenda are incremental. All electric buildings will represent less than 1% of the existing housing units on an annual basis. Yet the fossil fuel industry is spending big on ads, robocalls, and lobbying. There's a lot of false information that's been communicated. They don't work upstate in the winter. Well, we have nearly 2,000 homes in Tompkins County that are heated in the winter with heat pumps. During the Buffalo storm, those with gas service survived, whereas others did not. In fact, 11 who had fossil fuels died. You need electricity to power the fans circulating the heat. Another messaging meme is protect your freedom, don't let the government abolish gas stoves. We're urging residents to tighten their building envelopes to increase comfort and save energy costs. The scientific studies are clear. Combusting fossil fuels in energy-efficient homes is not healthy. More New Yorkers die from indoor air pollution than any other state. So at the peak meeting, Randy had some concerns about the viability of the electric grid. I talked to him before the meeting. I'm going to talk to him outside this meeting about it. But I've been engaged with NYSEG negotiations in the last 3 rate cases, and I focused much of my energy on my attention to the grid and its ability to serve all of us. So we need the legislators to step up, support our work in addressing these critical issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Martha Robertson.
Hi, Martha Robertson, Town of Dryden. I want to echo Brian's comments on Resolution L and thank Annie Corman and Veronica Pilar for taking this message to state legislators at NYSAC last week. It really is, we really do have a climate emergency. And I think it's important to note it's not a matter of, well, we could get along and just, wait till things, there's no waiting anymore. We really can't. As your resolution says, the cost of inaction on our goals far exceeds the cost of taking action. Now, according to the Climate Action Scoping Plan, more than $115 billion in excess is the cost of inaction. So we have, the Climate Action Council at the state level spent 2 years working on this comprehensive, like just soup to nuts scoping plan. And that's great, but the legislature and the governor need to put it in place. And they need to there's a lot the agencies can do, but the legislation and the budget measures that are listed in your Resolution L are really critical to actually doing what needs to be done. This is going to be hard. Nobody said it was going to be easy. Nobody said it was going to be cheap. But the fact is, the alternative, it's not a matter of like life as we know it now. The alternative is going to be harder and more expensive and disastrous for all of us, but especially for communities of color, especially for lower income people who can't afford, to move to somewhere on higher ground or somewhere with more water, let's say. And we're feeling these impacts. Climate change is not sometime in the future, it's now. It really is. And I don't know about you all, but when I look at my grandkids and I say, wow, they're going to be, when they're my age, they're going to be, what is it, 2080 or something, 2180. That's a terrifying idea. What's the world going to look like? What's the world going to look like in 10 years when we see what's going on right now? So it is important to show leadership. And New York has the opportunity to show leadership. And yes, the fossil fuel industry has the money to get the messages out, to scare people, to make people think the big bad government is coming to take your stove or whatever it is. But In fact, this is on all of us. We all have to make an effort for the sake of our children and our grandchildren. So I thank you for taking up this measure. I hope you'll pass it tonight on consent. It'd be great if it could be a bipartisan measure. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Martha. So a little fun fact. Martha Robertson was not just known for being a past legislator, but was also someone I consider a Tompkins queen for the anti-fracking movement. So thank you for coming tonight and speaking on that, Martha. Next is Irene Weiser.
Hi. It's kind of nice to be here and be back and see Mike Ziegler smiling at me. And no, this is really great, you guys. This is like my coming out after COVID. So it's lovely to be here. I was so excited. Two things I'm really excited about. One is whoever had the genius to go back to having a peak committee, thank you. We really needed to just separate the energy and environmental issues out, and I really appreciate it. I appreciate the leadership on the committee. Randy, I really appreciate your questions and curiosity and open-mindedness, so thank you. And I appreciate the support for the resolution, and I appreciate that it's on the consent agenda. I hope that means that really everybody is on board with it. It's so important. One of the bills in there, my favorite bill is the New York Heat Act, and it changes something. So for us to be able to legally transition, we have to change the laws in New York State, because right now the utilities are required to deliver gas to anybody who asks for it, except like up in Lansing where there isn't enough supply where it would crash the system. But as a general rule, they're required to provide gas to anybody who asks for it. That law goes back to actually on the books, the gas service is required to light the street lamps and lamps in the buildings. That's how old that law is. So the New York Heat Act changes that and says that utilities are able to provide thermal energy as opposed to required to provide gas. And it changes some other laws that provide subsidies for hooking up to the gas and yada, yada. It's a super important bill, and we really can't move forward at this transition that we have to do until that law passes. There's another law in there that our own Anna Kellis is sponsoring, and it eliminates over 150 million, wait, is that right? 330 million, thank you, out of 1.5 billion in fossil fuel subsidies that New York State provides every year to the fossil fuel industry. This shaves off 330 million of those subsidies to fossil fuel and just puts it in the budget. It doesn't designate that it has to go to environmental causes, although you know me, I'll be fighting for that to happen too. But anyhow, I'm thrilled to see you all here. Happy to anytime anybody wants to talk about energy, I'll put you to sleep at night doing that, and thank you.
Great. Thank you, Irene. Okay, we do have one speaker via Zoom, Reggie Teasley.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Good. My name is Reggie Teasley. I'm a member of the Environmental Management Council, but I'm speaking just as a citizen. I've lived in Tompkins County for 40 years. As a sociologist, I'm very interested in the big picture. So I'm interested in the society, the culture, history, and the future. I also have family in the West. I grew up in the West, so I'm always keeping an eye on what's going on out there environmentally. Honestly, I can imagine my Western family moving here at some point. And I'm hoping that this will be an enclave for them. I really do think that we live in a very strange time where we really are facing an existential threat. We throw that word around, but what I want you to know is you do not have to be an existentialist philosopher to understand that we are facing a real existential threat. frankly, I'm particularly interested in biodiversity, which is also in a lot of trouble. There's no guarantee that our species will be around for the long term. I hope that a lot of the other species are, however, and I want to thank Peak for bringing forward this resolution. I want to thank Tompkins County for being such a progressive place that's thinking long and hard about our future and encouraging our leaders who are feeling all kinds of political pressure to move quickly. We simply have no time. We're already a little behind. But what you're doing is exactly right. I really appreciate it. And I think one of these days, this will be the new homeland for my Western family because it'll be an enclave. You will have made it a safe enclave. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on privilege of the floor? Okay. Next, let's move on to municipal officials. And I see George McGonigal from the City of Ithaca here.
Good evening, everyone. I feel fortunate to be here tonight and with Carol Kamen, and I thank you for honoring her. I've known her for a long time, and she's one of my favorite people, period. And when it comes to historians, she's a major leaguer. She really is. So we're lucky to have her. So thank you for honoring her. And now, for the rest of the news, at City Council last week, we were honored to appoint Robert Covert as our new fire chief. He's served the city for many, many years. He's going to be an excellent fire chief. He was approved unanimously, and we're very happy to have him. The process for hiring a permanent chief of police has begun. An outside consultant has been hired to search throughout the country for candidates. Community input sessions have been scheduled and announced for Saturday, March 11th. That's this coming Saturday from 11 to 12:30, and next Monday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Those are Zoom sessions that anybody can, hopefully from the city, can call in and share their thoughts. The Reimagining Public Safety Special Committee has issued their draft report, and a public hearing on that subject is set for tomorrow in City Hall, Council Chambers at 6 p.m. And people will be able to Zoom in for that or submit comments and suggestions via email or letter, as well as attend in person. And we'll knock on wood on that. The CSEA DPW Labor Unit, which represents our DPW workers, has reached an agreement with the city on a 5-year contract. We're extremely happy about that. It's a good contract. It was a significantly better contract than the one that was first offered. It was passed pretty overwhelmingly, and I sincerely hope that it is a turning point in the relationship between City Hall and its workers, and I'm hoping morale is going to improve, and the other contracts that are up for negotiation go smoothly, and I hope this is a turning point. Finally, in terms of the approved encampment that we've been talking about in the Southwest, those plans are continuing, and the city's developing an RFP to put out for contractors that would manage the campsite, and it will have basic sanitary facilities, which would include portable restrooms with flush toilets, sinks and showers with hot and cold water, and trash collection, and an office space, portable office space for outreach workers and management. And so we're looking forward to making that happen this spring. That's all I have.
Okay, are there any questions for George?
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Mike Lane?
George, I read an article that, tell me it ain't so, that maybe you're not going to run again. And if that's the case, I'm very sad to hear that. I wanted to say that. And but maybe if you take a rest period, and maybe someday if there's a vacancy here, you can move up to what I heard you term one time as the House of Lords.
I forget those things. Thank you very much, Mike. I really enjoy working with you all, and it's been a big part of my life, and 10 years is enough, I think, and somebody else's turn.
Great. Thank you, George. Mike Sigler.
Hey, George, I just had two questions. You had mentioned the encampment, so I understand the one structure. So if somebody wanted to, I guess, stay there, what would they bring, a tent, and they would pitch a tent, and then they would have access to like the showers, and maybe, I don't know if there'd be a laundry there, but stuff like that.
Yeah, that's the idea. It comes from the Tides proposal we were working on, and this is something that we can put together more quickly, and we can see how it goes. There'll be the showers, and the office space will be basically like construction trailers, and people will still be camping. If it works well, then there may be more infrastructure in following years. It may start with platforms for tents, and then we'll see what happens. But that's where we're at this year.
We're looking at that one location, the one.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay, that
Behind Walmart.
Okay. My other thing is not a question, well, it's a question and more of a thing. So there's this FEMA meeting tomorrow on the flood maps. I just want to let you know, I mean, I don't have any constituents, obviously, in the city, but I have people coming to me worried about the floodplain maps changing, and that their flood insurance is going to go up quite a bit. Obviously, it's not just that. I mean, it's everything. It's taxes. They just see all their expenses going up, and then, like, this is one more thing. And they're just worried because they don't really know how high they're going to go. So just wanted to kind of let you've probably heard the same thing, so.
Yeah, I bet Travis and Veronica hear more about it than I do. But I will say that Mike Thorne, the superintendent of Public Works, is on top of this, and he's representing the city with the state, and I have a lot of confidence in him.
I'm not putting it on the city. I mean, the dewatering site has been ready.
Yes, it has.
Yeah.
It's ready right now.
I know.
Dan Klein.
George, in a lot of the Tides discussions that have happened up till now, there was many people had an assumption that running that operation would be a joint county-city venture. And I'm wondering if you could say anything about the current thinking of that idea in the iteration that you're describing now.
Excellent question.
Thank you.
Correct me if I'm wrong. The county set aside $100,000 to deal with the homeless problem. They made it quite clear to me and to the rest of Common Council that they wanted us to put aside $100,000 as well, which we did. We've been asked to come up with a specific plan. We have done that. So The city is going to prepare the site and bring in the infrastructure, this bare bones infrastructure. But yes, we would like to partner with the county in making this happen. There'll be a contract to manage it. And yeah, we would like to continue with how we started, seeing this as a joint venture.
Thank you. A couple of things. So the $100,000 that the county set aside is in contingency, which means we have to vote it out, just so you know. So last year, all our housing and homelessness issues went through our Health and Human Services Committee. And in that, I had always said, it was never like a formal vote, but I had always said, and I think there was a lot of agreement that when the city gets to the point where it's going to issue an RFP or an RFEI, that's the moment that the city and the county would get back together to discuss what might be in that. Because if the county is being expected to share some of the costs, we're going to want to be part of the conversation about the scope of it. So I just wanted to say that again, and to let you know that now housing and homelessness issues are run through the HED, Housing and Economic Development Committee, which Greg is the chair of. So I just wanted to lay all that out.
Well, if you're trying to confuse me, you succeeded.
Okay, so let me, seriously? So yeah.
I think I have no objection to what you just said about the county being involved in what the RFP is what the plan is. We wanted to make clear that we were serious about this, so we got the ball rolling.
Great, and again, it's just, there was no formal vote on it, but before the RFP, I would want to see, before the RFP goes out, that the city and the county sit down and have a really good conversation to make sure that we're on the same page.
Again, I have no objection other than we want this to happen this spring. We don't want to talk about it for 3 months.
I think what Dan is saying, though, is that we need to go along the same journey that you're going along. It's not fair for the city to make all the decisions and then to hand us a bill at the end of the day after all the decisions have been made. So I think what would be really important is for George or whoever heads up the decision-making at the city to reach out to Greg Mezzi and to schedule a time to come into that committee and talk about exactly what's going on, what you're proposing. Because, I've gone back and I've watched Health and Human Services, and this is quite a bit different than the tides that was being proposed. And some of us were on board with that, some of us were not. And so I think there just needs to be a little bit better communication in order for us to be partners in this.
When's your next meeting?
We have one on Thursday from 3 to 5, and then we have one on April 5th from 3 to 5. I'm happy to make as much time as you need to talk about the issue.
I can't speak for City Hall, but I would ask you to, let's make room for this coming Thursday.
Okay. Who's the best person? Should I just I can send you an email, and if you want to connect us with the appropriate people?
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, next is Rich John.
George, I wanted to just add my voice to say thank you to you and everybody at the city who's worked on this issue. I know this is one of the most difficult subjects that the city has had to address, and the county as well, because I agree with you completely. This is something where both the city and the county have interests in making sure this issue is addressed in some different way. The status quo is bad for so many different reasons, and I certainly won't relist them because we've talked about them over and over again, and to see some forward progress is really, really encouraging to me. And yeah, I hope that those communications between the city and the county happen as quickly as possible, and we move forward with the city on this. This is really good news. Thank you.
Thanks, and thanks for your help with this, Rich. You've been working on this a long time as well.
Deborah Dawson, and then Randy Brown.
Well, I hate to be the ants on your picnic, but, and I do appreciate how difficult this problem is and how hard we've been beating our heads collectively, city and county, against this wall. But I thought when Mr. Sigler brought up the new FEMA flood maps.
I can't hear you.
Oh, I thought when Mike brought up the new flood maps, we might be taking this in a different direction, which is the fact that I'm pretty sure that that property behind Walmart is in a flood zone.
There's I can't think of the right word for it, but there's areas that are too wet for building. It's kind of a different spots here and there, but the spot that we're talking about is in the front of the property, and it isn't that.
So you've seen the maps and it's not.
I've seen the maps and I've been there many times.
Okay. All right, thank you. I'll take your word for it.
Randy Brown.
Yeah, George, thanks to you and the city for really taking this on. I'm glad you're going as fast as you can. I agree that, you should be communicating with the housing group, but most of what you're going to need from the county is going to be human services, right? I mean, that's what you're going to need. You're going to need services which are, it's going to fall back on the Health and Human Services Committee. So I don't maybe the contract should go this direction or whatever it may be, but you're asking for services, right? I mean, that's what you really want from the county.
Yep, and if things go the way we think they will, it should be easier to provide those services from this one location. It should make things.
Yeah, I agree.
Better.
We need to. I just think that it touches both sides, it seems.
No, good point.
Yeah.
Ann Corman, and then Greg Mezzi.
I'll try and be real quick. I just wanted to say, George, thanks to you and for the city doing, everything you can to help with energy efficiency, because, the county doesn't have land use, the city does. And as some people spoke earlier today at Privilege of the Floor, that's what we're trying to do. We're limited to mostly county buildings. We try and help the municipalities. And so to me, it's inspiring what the city has been doing. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you. I'll pass that along. Appreciate it, Ann.
Greg Mezzi.
George, I also share the sentiment that I was sad to see you're not running again, but appreciate everything you have done in the city. And to Randy's point, and I know this is something Sean and I think actually just yesterday talked about, was maybe doing a joint committee of HED, and I know, Dan, we've touched on this at some point, of the two committees, specifically to talk about the homelessness issue and how we can address that working together across committees. So it is on the agenda. Obviously, this helps accelerate the timeline, so I appreciate that. But we'll definitely get something scheduled, and I'll work with Dan, and we'll make sure that we have a collaborative effort, I guess, or approach.
So do you meet here on Thursday night?
We do meet in chambers on Thursday, yes.
What time?
3 to 5.
I'm usually watching cartoons at that time.
Travis Brooks.
George, the 100,000 from the county, the 100,000 from the city, that's for the build or for the, I guess, the service provider, the manager, or is that for both?
I don't think that's been determined.
Okay.
It's my understanding that we both put up $100,000 to try to help solve this issue. I was assuming part of it would be infrastructure and part of it would be establishing services, but I'm not the only one making up that decision.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments for George this evening? Okay, I don't see any. Thank you, George, for coming.
Thank you very much.
we're not going to say our goodbyes yet. You still have a lot of time left. Okay, next we're going to move on to legislator privilege of the floor. Amanda Champion and Corman.
Thanks. You all have a copy of Robert's Rules of Order in brief on your desks. You can thank the Government Operations Committee and our clerks for getting this for you. We had yet another riveting conversation at GO about Robert's Rules, and it was either Rich or Mike who said we should get a copy of the brief version for everyone. So Katrina made that happen, and there will be a test, so stay tuned.
Thank you, Amanda. Ann Corman next.
I was going to speak, but upon reading in the book here, I might be out of order. No, just kidding you. Thank you for those books. I wanted to thank my colleagues and members of the public who came out and celebrated Women's History Month and honoring Carol Kamen. And one of the people that spoke was from the town of Ulysses, which I represent, and just wanted to give you a little more information on one of the activities that Vivian's helping organize in our town, and that's celebrating women who tell our stories. And that's at the Trumansburg Conservatory of Fine Arts on Saturday, March 11th, 3 to 5. So please come on out. I hope to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Any other legislators? Dan Klein and then Randy Brown. Veronica?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So a number of us went to the New York State Association of Counties annual meeting last week, and perhaps others will be talking about it. Some of us went to a part of it called an Energy Summit, and during that there was quite a bit of talk about, what was used as an example quite often was Tompkins County's role in refurbishing a hydroelectric dam in Waterloo, and that's where we get all the electricity. We, county government, get all the electricity from that dam. And the company that runs it is called Gravity Renewables, and a man named Omai Elphick spoke a little bit, and he said that the plant should operate for, it's been 100 years already that it's been operating, and he expects that it should operate for another 100 years, quote, if everyone involved stays well-behaved. I'm not sure what that meant, but it's supposed to stay well-behaved. But the real reason I'm bringing this up is because we were also there to receive an award on behalf of Tompkins County for our role in the formation of MEGA, the Municipal Electric and Gas Alliance. I think Mike Lane was on the legislature at the time that was formed.
All the credit goes to Stu Stein.
Yeah, Stu Stein, former board member and chair. Anyway, so that was 25 years ago, and they presented this award to us on behalf of the whole county, so I'll put it up on the mailboxes and we'll have it displayed for a while. It's real crystal, for whatever that's worth. Thanks.
Very nice. Okay, next is Randy Brown.
Yes, last weekend I went to an open house at 1619 West Danby Road, and it's called it's a house that a bunch of families came together and bought. It's a beautiful old house. It's called the Stratton House, which actually used to be what West Danby was. Stratton is the name was used, so that's a history thing for today. And it's also a restored barn there. It's beautiful grounds, and so I just want to let people know that it's a nice bed and breakfast and another place to stay. So.
Great. Thanks, Randy. Veronica Pillar and Mike Lane.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I wanted to speak briefly on trans rights, because recently there's been an alarming sharp rise in anti-transgender rhetoric and policy in this country. I'm sure you've heard of the bathroom bills that require kids to use bathrooms that match their genitals rather than their actual asserted gender. Other laws ban teachers from using their students' preferred pronouns. I'm a teacher, I have trans students, and I would never call my students by pronouns they don't use because that is a denial of who they are. Seems pretty basic. Several states are banning gender-affirming healthcare for minors, essentially requiring teenagers to detransition. Tennessee has banned wearing clothes that don't match the gender on your birth certificate. Florida is working on legalizing the kidnapping of trans children and bringing them back to Florida for conversion therapy. And a speaker at a large conference last week called for the eradication of transgenderism, which inherently involves the eradication of transgender people. I'm not making any of this up. This is inhumane and terrifying. I was always taught that our country was founded on ideals of freedom, on the inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now a fringe minority pushing these policies is trying to take away freedoms. Freedom to live our truths, freedom to choose your name, freedom to choose your pronouns, freedom to dress in clothes that are feminine, masculine, both and neither, freedom to discuss and obtain medical care with a doctor who will learn and understand your particular self and your particular needs. We will not back down in defending these freedoms. In New York State, 4 years ago, the state enacted the Gender Expression Non-Discrimination Act, or GENDA, which added gender identity and expression as a protected class in New York State's human rights and hate crimes laws. In Tompkins County, gender identity and expression has been protected in our human rights policy since before that, I want to say 2004. And in the middle of all this horror, I'm happy that we have some strong, like, trans and queer community in this county supporting each other. So I'd like to shout out to the community organizations doing this work. Shout out to the county public library for affirming LGBTQ kids and adults, for hosting a drag class for teenagers. I went, I don't know, a month or so ago to see a trans comic artist speak, and the space there was just like the most loving, queer, affirming place I'd been in a while. And just shout out to every queer and trans kid, teen, and adult living their fullest beautiful selves, or struggling to live their fullest beautiful selves, or just beginning to have gender feelings and wonder if maybe they have a fuller, beautiful self that has so far been buried. Our county needs to be a place where everyone can explore these feelings freely and with enthusiastic community support. I hope everyone listening will join me in looking for ways to be proactive to protect our people, to protect trans and non-binary folks in this county, and be ready to extend protections to trans folks and their families who might flee other places to come here while it's still safe. And for anyone listening, I'd love to hear what more concretely is helpful and what my colleagues and I can do to keep this trans hatred and attacks on trans people out of Tompkins County. Thanks.
Thank you, Veronica, for bringing that forward to all of us. Mike Lane?
I just wanted to, I guess I'm following up on Dan. Dan, I didn't know we actually got given an award, but in the NISAC magazine that got sent to us, on page 34, there's an article about MEGA, the Municipal Electric and Gas Alliance, and because it's our 25th year. And as I said, Stu Stein and then also Barbara Blanchard worked on this. And our first partner was Cuyahoga County. And this article tells me that there are now 235 public entities that have aggregated to stabilize the electric and gas market for municipalities. And I think that's a pretty nice thing. I think this and our healthcare consortium are real legacies for the forward thinking of Tompkins County.
Mike, take a look at the photo on the back, too, if you can hold it up.
Back.
Oh, yeah. Us. I couldn't be there that day, but there's all the group from Tompkins County.
Thank you, Mike. Anyone else for privilege of the floor for legislators? Rich John?
I just wanted to give a shout out to our airport for putting on a town hall last week and making a really good effort to explain to the flying public what's happening with air service in our community and the efforts that are being made to increase air service. Right now we have flights to Newark and JFK, but there's a lot of talk about trying to get more routes to other places as well. The town hall also did a good job of explaining why we're where we're at. And it's really a result of the pandemic when incentives were given by the airlines to the older pilots to encourage them to retire early. And that was a way for the airlines to get through the pandemic without carrying a very large payroll. And so it helped them there, but once people started flying again, they didn't have enough pilots. And so to meet the demand on their main routes, they just brought up pilots from all of the regional carriers. And we are one of those sites that lost service, not because it wasn't a profitable place for planes to go, but because there just aren't enough pilots right now. There are more pilots coming online, but it's going to take a very long time to get there. One thing that's really good is that we are a profitable place to fly to when they have pilots. So it's likely that we will get service before a lot of other places. There's also movement going from a 50-seat plane to a 76-seat plane. And one of the questions I asked was, can our market support a 76-seat airplane? And the answer very emphatically was yes, it can, that there's enough people here wanting to travel from Ithaca that it can work. They also talked about a chicken and egg quality. The airlines will be more interested in restoring service here if they see demand here. And of course, when there aren't a lot of choices, it's hard to demonstrate that demand. And they are beginning a program called Try Ithaca. And the message that they want to send out is, if you're traveling, at least look at the Ithaca options. If you go to Newark and JFK, you can often get wherever you need to go fairly efficiently. But also just coming into the website and trying Ithaca to compare prices is helpful, because the airlines see that there's questions about flying out of Ithaca. And you may find that there is a flight that is within your budget and it'll work for you. So I just wanted to bring that to light. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. Ann Corman?
Thanks. My partner just booked a flight out of Ithaca, and it wound up being about the same as Syracuse going down to Savannah. And plus, if you factor in either parking for, 10 days or, me having to drive, her up to Syracuse. So thanks for bringing that up. What I wanted to mention was to thank my colleague, Veronica Pillar, for speaking up. I mean, it's something, I don't know if it's people get it in their news feeds or however you get news, but there's I kind of call it a wildfire of prejudice that's going across the country. And one of the biggest targets, I mean, there's several targets, people of color, but we don't often talk about LGBTQ, especially people who are trans. And I did hear the call to see what we could do here, and I'm open. I hope other people, could reach out to Veronica and I to see what we could do here to support people locally. So thank you.
Thanks, Ann. Greg?
Yeah, just two things real quick. One, thanks to Ann and Veronica for staying a little bit extra at NISAC and hitting Albany, the hill, as they say, I guess, to advocate and learn more and bring back things to our committee. I think that's important, and if others can take time and do that, I'm sure it was a valuable experience, and look forward to hearing more about that. So thanks for making that time commitment. The other thing is, I recently had the opportunity to attend the Tompkins County Chamber hosted, and I apologize for my voice today. I've got a sinus issue. I'm trying to make through it here, so I'll keep it brief. They hosted an LGBTQ roundtable, which was the first time they had a specific dedicated space for that. And that was really interesting to see people across the chamber community come together and share what they were looking for and how we could be more supportive within that organization to folks identifying with that community. So I definitely feel the support of the in our community, but realize that others need support, and we need to be good neighbors and citizens to others. So I appreciate the call for what actionable items we can take as well. But just also wanted to thank the Chamber for creating that space for people to come together.
Thanks, Greg. Any other legislator like to speak on privilege of the floor? Okay. Next is the chair's report, and I have a very short report this evening. I was able to go and visit the Alcohol and Drug Council last week. I did a tour with Angela Sullivan and Frank Krupa, and we toured with some of the media, and the facility is absolutely beautiful. If you haven't seen it yet, feel free to reach out to Angela. They're very proud of the facility, as they should be. And right now, they are slated, they're hoping to start accepting participants as soon as the end of April. But the one thing that is somewhat holding them up is they are really struggling to recruit nurses. So if you know of any nurse that is looking for a job, feel free to send them over to the Alcohol and Drug Council. The other thing is that I do have a chair's appointment this evening. It is for the Tompkins County Youth Services Board, Margaret Kirch-Gessner, Town of Danby representative, and her term expires December 31st, 2025. So on to reports by our county administrator, Lisa Holmes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a few updates tonight to make you aware of. Speaking about the NISAC conference, Dominic and I attended from Tompkins County. While there, Dominic facilitated a communications roundtable. And I think it's fair to say that the major topic of conversation was the governor's budget and the proposal to intercept the Medicaid FMAP funding. Also on the concern list was the assigned council 18B rates. So these are both major concerns for counties and unfunded mandates in both instances. While we were there, the governor did replace the state's interim budget director and appointed Robert Megna to that role. He's previously served in that role. And under Cuomo, and this was seen as potentially a positive thing for counties. In other news, we're happy to report that we've received the long-awaited Appalachian Regional Commission grant, which will enable us to commence efforts with organization-wide strategic operations planning for Tompkins County. That notification of grant acceptance is on tonight's consent agenda, so thank you, hopefully, in advance for that. The Community Justice Center has been working hard to finalize details of an upcoming community healing event. Please stay tuned for invitations, which are slated to go out tomorrow. And just a brief update on our searches. We start interviews for the Homeless Services Coordinator position this week. We start interviews for the County Historian next week. We continue interviewing Chief Equity Diversity Officer candidates the following week. The ITS Director position is now posted, and we'll be starting interviews for that position presumably the week after that, later this month. But just want to underscore how many executive level searches we've got going on, and many thanks to Ruby and her HR team for all of her support. And thank you to legislators and our department heads, staff, and community members who are serving on all of these interview panels. So we're busy.
Thank you, Lisa. Any questions for Lisa or comments? Deborah Dawson?
Yeah, this isn't so much a question. I just wanted to give Lisa first crack at the EFMAP problem in the governor's budget. This was probably the overarching theme of the NISAC conference. It was the lion's share of what we discussed at our Standing Committee on Taxation and Finance. It was a big topic in Dave Lucas's annual budget breakdown. And I wanted to elaborate a little bit on what we learned. Initially, I think when I heard that the budget director had been replaced, I was really hopeful that maybe that would make a difference. It doesn't appear that anything's going to make a difference, especially given the tenor of the governor's remarks since we got back from NYSAC. Dave Lucas pointed out that although the budget includes the money that they're intercepting, the budget is not the mechanism by which they've decided to change their strategy. It's actually an interpretation of the ACA. My suspicion is that although they've promised that there might be some revenue offset that will make up for what we lose, and you may be wondering, as I did initially, why the heck would they go through this really complicated process of withholding the money over here and making it up over here? And I suspect it's because they've been withholding the reconciliation funds, which now amount to several $1 billion that they owe the counties. And if they can persist in selling this reinterpretation of the ACA, that will give them cover to just never give us that money. So I think that's kind of where we're going. This is such a big deal to NYSAC that they have actually set up a website which has one of those clocks that run down second by second. It's called Cost Shift Countdown, I think. Just for giggles, check it out. They also have a lot of information on there about we should be letting our constituents know what kind of an impact this could have on their property taxes. Unfortunately, I think explaining it takes so flippin' long. I'm not sure that a lot of people are going to want to sit around and wait till we get to the big finish, but it's there if you want to take a look at it.
Thanks, Deb. Greg?
Yeah, just so everybody knows, there's 24 days, 5 hours, 21 minutes, and now 38 seconds on the cost shift countdown clock. But this also came up at the Chamber's Economic Summit recently. Senator Webb and Assemblymember Kellis spoke about it as well, which was a pretty good, large crowd. So it's definitely making its rounds. But anything we can do to encourage folks to reach out to the governor and their members of the legislature, that'd be great.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Lisa? Veronica Pillar?
Just a comment, since you mentioned the workshop Dominic facilitated at NYSAC, and Annie and I went to it, and it was really good. Good job. It's impressive, the ideas that float when you get a bunch of people doing similar jobs in different places in the room, and it was just a lot of, hey, what do you do? We do this. Oh, good idea. And yeah.
Thank you.
Ann Corman, Mike Lane.
And I'll just say, which I said, I think said something similar to Dominic at the time, right afterwards. But for me, it was actually my favorite workshop because it was totally different than all the rest, where people got to kind of introduce themselves and what they did and make connections and talk about what they did. So it was kind of like a round table type thing. Whereas, sometimes I can be seen drinking a lot of coffee at NYSAC to try and keep myself awake from sitting in rooms and being talked to. So anyway, I really liked the format that you did, Dominic, and the way you presented the information. And to write in real time, get people to sign up so that they could connect to each other around the state.
Mike Lane?
I think we talked about a little bit, and I saw it in your update, but we do now have our new transportation planner on board. He was supposed to start today. Did that happen?
Yes. Yep,
Frank Doldo.
Frank Doldo, that's
very,
correct.
I was on the search committee and seemed to be a very experienced person who's coming down from Jefferson County.
Thank you for bringing that up, Mike.
Great, thank you. Next, we have County Attorney Bill Troy.
I have one matter to report on, and I think we'll do that a little later in executive session.
Okay. Any questions or comments for Bill? Okay. Next, Interim Director of Finance, Drew Brayman. Hi, Drew.
Good evening. Hope everyone is well. Just a couple things to report on. As Lisa mentioned, finance is also going through some recruiting for a couple positions. Thanks a lot to HR. They have been wonderful. I know they're recruiting a lot across the county, so we appreciate their help. We're struggling through some of those vacancies, but we're moving forward. And I'll leave the rest for Deborah, but we've got an exciting budget capital personnel committee coming up next week. So I'll leave that for Deborah's report.
We certainly do. Thank you, Drew.
Any questions for Drew or comments? Okay, thank you, Drew.
Thank you.
Are there any resolutions to be added or withdrawn from the agenda? Okay, let's move on to the consent agenda. Resolutions and appointments to be voted on as a group unless any member of the legislature requests that a resolution or appointment be instead included separately and individually as part of the business of standing or special committees. Randy?
Remove, I think it's J and L.
Okay, so just to confirm, Resolution J, acceptance of the ARC grant?
Yep.
Okay, and then L, resolution to support state budget proposals?
Yes.
Okay. We do have a few advisory appointments. Okay, I was told that we are also going to pull I, Resolution I, because there's going to be an update for that. So I'll start off with advisory board appointments, ID 11510. Out of the Government Operations Committee, Library Board of Trustees, Elizabeth Chabot, trust member, term expires December 31st, 2024. Health and Human Services Committee, Community Mental Health Services Board, Mental Health Subcommittee, Tracy Decker, community member, term expires December 31st, 2026. Community Mental Health Services Board, Substance Abuse Subcommittee, Ronald Schoenman, community member, term expires December 31st, 2026. Planning, Energy, and Environmental Quality Committee, Environmental Management Council, Ingrid Zabel, Town of Ithaca representative, term expires December 31st, 2024. Health and Human Services Committee, Resolution A, budget adjustment, Safe Harbor ID 11415. Resolution B, budget adjustment, Social Services, Enhanced APS grants, ID 11500. Resolution C, budget adjustment, County Office for the Aging, FoodNet Meals on Wheels Wellness and Nutrition Grant, ID 11512. Resolution D, budget adjustment, Tompkins County Office for the Aging, American Rescue Plan Funding 2023, ID 11513. Resolution E, budget adjustment, Tompkins County Office for the Aging, Generations of Care Respite, ID 11514. Resolution F, budget adjustment, Tompkins County Office for the Aging, Unmet Needs, Ithaca Neighborhood Housing Services, ID 11515. Facilities and Infrastructure Committee, Resolution G, amending Resolution Number 103 of 2022, authorizing award of bid and anticipated receipt and acceptance of Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, and New York State Department of Transportation, New York State NYS DOT, grant for rehabilitation of taxiway lighting, construction, Ithaca Tompkins International Airport, ID 11498. Government Operations Committee, Resolution H, appointment to temporary hearing panels, ID 11491. We're pulling that one. Moving on to Resolution J, acceptance of art. We're going to pull that one too. Sorry. Planning, Energy, and Environmental Quality Committee, Resolution K, designating Tompkins County Climate and Sustainable Energy Advisory Board as the Climate Smart Community Task Force for Tompkins County and designating a coordinator for the Climate Smart Communities Initiative, ID 11505. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Greg Mezzi, seconded by Travis Brooks. And we will vote via hand. Oh.
Point of order?
Sure.
So which ones have been pulled?
Okay, the ones that have been pulled, I, J, and L. Okay. So we will vote with the show of hands. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you. Consent agenda passes. Now we can move on to our standing committees, Planning, Energy, and Environmental Quality Committee, Ann Corman, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We last met on Thursday, February 23rd at 10 a.m. And we had 2 resolutions, one which passed already. And I'm going to get right to this resolution because I know we're trucking right along here. Actually, before I do that, I just wanted to mention one thing so I don't forget. Barb Ekstrom, our head of our Recycling and Materials Management Department, as folks might know, is retiring as of April 7th. And at the next peak meeting, we asked her just to come in person. So I don't know if I'm assuming her department will be doing something for her, and I hope we hear about that. But if folks want to come and say goodbye to her at that meeting, our next peak meeting is March 20th at 10 a.m. here. So the resolution that got pulled is to support the state budget proposals to address climate change. And we had several speakers come and talk about it already. The only thing that I'd like to add at this point is the climate action plan that was passed at the state level. There are some nuts and bolts of it actually operating that the Senate and legislature are working on how to implement, how to get either the funding there or how to make some of the regulations for it at the state level. And so that's what this does. And myself and also Veronica, we've talked with Leah Webb's office. I talked with Anna Kellis's office about this, and we also talked with Senator Harkman, the chair of the, I'm not sure the exact, but I think it's the Environmental Conservation Committee at the state level, and they were really appreciative of us passing it through at the committee. And so I hope that passes so that we can pass that along to the state level. Because here at the county, there's only, as I mentioned to George at the city, there's only so much we can do with our buildings here at the county, and we need the state or the local municipalities to really, to change their laws or their building codes and things like that. So that's what this resolution does, is support the state in the initiatives that they currently, the state Senate and Assembly, the current bills that they're just trying to pass. Thank you.
Thanks, Ann. Any other questions or comments in regards to Resolution L? Randy Brown and Mike Sigler.
Yes, I'd like first I'd say some clarification, Ann, if you could help me. So, sure. So the current plan of New York State, this is to move those dates up. This resolution of what the implementation the state wants to do from 2006 to 2009 to 2024, 2027. That's the biggest change for this compared to what the state currently is planning or doing?
That's one of them from 2029 to starting in 2024 and 27. So moving it up a couple of years for the all-electric buildings.
Okay, so something was a little different from what we looked at in Peak, and I'm not sure what it is, but is there something that is slightly different, or
you know what? Can I actually ask for someone to second that?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, right.
Sorry about that. Deborah Dawson.
Sorry about that.
I didn't change anything from.
Okay, maybe I just misread it before.
Peak.
So as primarily I look at this as new buildings.
Right.
They want to be all electric. And faster than what the state currently plans. And when I look at our county, we build very few houses, average less than 20 a year, I think. And the large majority of those are over $200,000. So in some of these lower cost homes, manufactured homes, there are no regulations for how they're supposed to be completed for energy consumption and reduction, to my knowledge. I know we've supported that in our plan when we made comments back to the state from the planning department, but that's not in this law, correct? About taking existing buildings, of which there are 2,700 manufactured homes in this county, and increasing quickly, as fast as we can, to make them more energy efficient and electric.
I believe you're correct. So you said a lot there. I was trying to follow, and I appreciate you, as was said before, asking these questions. If I'm following you correctly, I agree with you. Yes, that this does not address older buildings. These particular initiatives here. This is well, actually, not all of those. I'm sorry. The one you said about electrifying new buildings, that part does not. The other things do. So if you.
I read that, yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of the other ones.
This resolution, but not the state's. The state's not planning that. This is just our resolution saying that we're pushing this.
Right, and most of these, if not all, most of these address specific bills that are in committees at the state legislature where they're looking at passing these initiatives. So we're saying, please, Tompkins County supports these. Please pass these. Does that make sense?
It does. And I spent a couple hours trying to read about this stuff, and it's overwhelming. So
yeah.
Actually, I'll send a document I found I thought was quite interesting, talking about electrical consumption and whatnot. I'm against fracking completely. I think it's a bad idea. But I also think there's a value for natural gas. I think it's too aggressive. So I'm thinking about it. So thanks.
Can I just respond to one part?
Sure.
That for natural gas, I myself and talking with some of the people that we had here speak, well, all three people here from the case board, which help me go through and help Veronica go through all this and cipher it out. All the people I've talked to, not against using gas for industrial use. I think so. Just to let you know.
Mike Sigler.
So I'm not going to be voting for this, and I'm going to explain why. I consider myself a conservationist, so I'm going to talk kind of from that perspective too. I think this whole thing makes this so complicated, and it doesn't actually need to be this complicated. I mean, the main problem with global warming is putting carbon in the atmosphere. I've said this before. How do you address that? Don't put carbon in the atmosphere. So the problem with this whole thing that the governor has come up with is it just talks about demand, like, oh, we're going to do this, and we're going to cut demand, and we're going to tell people we're going to electrify houses, and we're going to electrify cars. And frankly, none of that matters. And and I don't like to say it that way, so maybe I'll figure out a better way to say it, but it'll be important eventually. But for this moment in time, you can electrify everything. You don't have the power available for that kind of demand. Right now in this state, 71% of your electricity comes from fossil fuels. 71%. That means 29% comes from renewables. But what they don't tell you is more than half of that renewable is made up by Niagara Falls. And they're not making any more Niagara Falls. So it would seem to me that if you really wanted to go after this problem, try to put the electricity on the grid that we need right now, not using fossil fuels. And frankly, I heard a lot of things tonight, like Martha Robertson when she spoke. I mean, I'm not attacking her in any way. I'm just going to reference the things that she said. You know, there's no more waiting. There's no more time anymore. You know, the alternative is worse. Not something in our future, it's something right now. Someone else called this an existential threat. Okay, accept all of that, right? Then the only way to do this is nuclear power. And I'm not some big shill for nuclear. Like, I'm not coming out here and nuclear's giving me money or something. It's not Mike Sigler's opinion. There's literally no other way to do it. And if somebody said, well, nuclear power, it takes 10 years to build a nuclear plant. How long do you think it takes to build a utility-scale solar array? I mean, they're building one in Lansing right now. They started something like 4 years ago. By the time that is in the ground and producing power, it'll only be rated 200 megawatts, which doesn't even replace the coal plant we had and doesn't replace it for 6 months out of the year. It really only replaces the coal plant in June. So why don't we work on that? Why don't we literally work on maybe getting the power to where we need it to be right now, as opposed to let's electrify everything and increase the demand even more? Because I don't think, I don't have to teach an economics class for people to know that if you increase the demand and you don't increase the supply, that the price will go up. And in this proposal too, there's a cap and trade, right? So you're going to cap electricity for major producers and distributors. Okay, so that's NYSEG and whoever produces the electricity, they're going to get charged a fee. Well, they're not going to pay the fee. You're going to pay the fee. So this necessarily increases the cost of electricity on every single constituent I have. And frankly, they're tapped out. They're saying, you know what, my electricity rate went, up 100%. I know my heating oil went up, to $4.99 this year. And you can say, well, you should switch to electric to heat your home. Well, listen, the one guy who really adopted electricity for building locally is the Lucenti family up on Warren Road. That is all electric up there, all electric heat. But to do that, they had to put in, I think at the time, and this was years ago, a $60,000 new electric line, and they paid for that. NYSEG didn't pay for that. That is the kind of infrastructure investment you're going to need if you want everything to be electric. You put 3 cars that are electric on a street, you're going to have to redo the grid. And again, it's not NYSEG paying for that. You are paying for that. So at a time when my folks are struggling with increased taxes, with increased floodplain maps, with increases of electricity, you are asking them to pay even more to NYSEG. And it's not even coming, they can argue, well, it's going to come back to them. So great, it's another pass-through. We're making it, again, more complicated. So again, I don't understand why we need all of this. If she were to say, you know what, we're going to embrace nuclear power and we're going to put more electricity on the grid so your electricity goes down in price, and then we can address all these other demands and increase demand at that point, great. But that is not where we are, and we haven't been for years. So thank you very much.
Veronica Pillar and Rich John.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mike, thanks for bringing up the issue of burden on the taxpayer or the ratepayer. That makes me even more excited that one of the things this resolution is calling for, second bullet point, is the HEAT Act, which does a couple things, eliminates utilities' obligation to serve gas, so it takes away a cost that NYSEG is currently having to pay, that NYSEG does pay, freeing up more money for them, which you can't trust them to give to people. But the other part of it is that it helps limit household energy burden to under 6% of their income, of our income, the ratepayer. So it's built into this is capping runaway energy costs, not for NYSEG, for the individual.
Okay. Rich John?
Mike, I agree with you entirely that this raises important questions about where does the supply come from. And it is possible that nuclear power is one of the ways to do that. And I think we have to be open to have that conversation versus other possibilities. I mentioned I've been reading about something developed in Finland called a sand battery, where they effectively fill silos, insulated silos with sand, and heat them with renewable power, and then get the sand up to 500 degrees and draw the heat off. And they're heating buildings in Finland in the winter with sand batteries. If it works there, it probably would work in Tompkins County. So, there are ways through this. If we don't start, we'll never get there. I don't think this is a perfect resolution. I don't think this is calling for the full solutions, but it sends us on a course. And yes, we have a tremendous amount of work if we're going to arrive where we want to get to. But I don't think that recognizing the difficulty of it is a reason to say, let's not vote for this. Thanks.
Lee Shurtleff, Greg Muzzy, and Travis Brooks.
I need as much of anything as clarification in lines 23 and 24. I'm struggling with this, and it wasn't clear to me, particularly buildings less than 4 stories by 2026, new buildings, and all buildings by 2029, meaning all buildings or all new buildings over the 4 stories?
New. New. Right, Veronica? Is that what you're...
Yeah, that was my understanding.
Well, by implication, the resolution told me that we were looking at retrofitting hundreds of thousands or millions of structures by 2029.
And I move to add the word new between all and buildings in line 24.
Who's a mover? And was
can, yeah, yes, that's friendly.
Okay. Deborah was a seconder.
Do you want to wait on Deborah?
I could.
Can we add
Okay.
the word new?
Do you know what you're? Yeah.
We add the word new to one part, new buildings.
Okay, that's friendly. Okay.
Can I answer that question then? So you were asking, is there provisions in here to help retrofit older buildings? Is that your question?
So much provisions, but requirements or mandates?
I don't know of any mandates. I will say I don't know the CLCPA and the scoping plan inside and out at all. I rely on my experts. We are just looking at, I asked them to pull out the most important things, and for us too, it was about, helping people with low to moderate incomes to be able to afford electricity, to be able to retrofit their houses, and that's what some of these provisions in here, low-cost loans, or zero interest loans, and things like that to help people retrofit.
Okay, thank you.
Greg Muzzy.
Yeah, so I have 2 things. I hear my colleague Mike Sigler's point about passing on cost burdens, and I think we need to do everything to make sure that we prioritize an investment in preserving our environment so that the costs don't become so much more later when we have to repair the damage that many things are creating within our communities. But we just have to work at that. But I think the cost of this definitely outweighs the cost later to repair and rebuild and take mitigative steps. So I'm willing to support this, but I'm also willing to work with any of my colleagues to make sure that we help keep those costs low and do what we can to lobby and advocate and legislate to help keep costs low for those in our community. The other thing I would ask my colleagues to do, just as a professional courtesy, is when we refer to the governor, if we could just refer to her as the governor, as opposed to a pronoun or she. I've found myself doing that recently and had to catch myself. So I would just ask others that, it's assembly member or senator or governor, regardless of party affiliation or support or disagreement. I still think it's important to respect the office and recognize them by their title and not by a pronoun.
Thank you, Greg. Travis Brooks.
Veronica, I just want to make sure I heard you correctly as I'm processing this. Did you say that there's a cap at 6% of total household income?
I mentioned that the bill aims for that or helps with that. I don't know the exact details or how this is enforced or checked or income measured.
Oh, okay. Because
It's a good question.
I was thinking about that, and if you make $100,000, that's $6,000 a year, right? I'm not great at math, but it sounds like $6,000 a year, so yes.
So that's, and there could have been more in here, but if you look up the different bills, this is, I don't know, there's different terms to help people, different classifications, but I believe it's in the realm of people with low to moderate incomes. So of course, for those folks, the burden would be much more than somebody makes 100,000 versus and pays 6,000 versus somebody that makes 30,000 and is paying 5,000 or 6,000. It's to keep their costs down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's always interesting to me. You could be a family that makes $100,000 a year and have 2 or 3 kids in college, a mortgage. I don't think that's, capping it at $6,000 doesn't help anybody, is what I'm saying. It actually would almost double my NYSEG bill. So I don't know if that sounds that great. And if you're at 30,000, it still go up.
If I could just add, some of these same folks that are working on these same issues, and some of the folks that were here today are actively working with NYSEG to try and, in the state, to keep rates low. So they're working at both ends of that.
Okay. I would just like to remind the legislature that this is a resolution that doesn't talk about something that we're enacting here in Tompkins County. This is one of these resolutions that we send on to our representatives, and I think there's some validity here and some importance, but I don't know if we need to go so deep in these resolutions. Mike Lane.
No to nuclear. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Mike Sigler.
Then I would have to question if this is actually an existential crisis. No, not oh, please. I mean, we could take this into any single thing that was an existential crisis, like World War II, and we were willing to sacrifice people on a beachhead to get into France. So if this is an existential crisis that's going to kill us all, and we are not willing to look at something that has been tried and true and improved over the last 50 years with not a single U.S. death, and we're not willing to look at that and the new technology that's come over since the last half century, then yes, it is not an existential crisis.
Point of order.
I call the vote.
Nuclear is
I'm
not
calling the
in
vote.
this resolution.
I had my hand up first.
Okay,
I'm calling
we have
the vote.
a call to order.
Second the call.
Okay. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Okay, Resolution L is on the floor. Resolution to support state budget proposals to address climate change, ID 11520. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and I'm an 11. 11. All those against, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. 11-3 vote, that passes. Thank you. Ann Corman, do you have another?
I'm done. That's good.
Okay. Do you have another resolution tonight?
No, I don't think so.
Oh.
All right.
Oh, you don't?
No. It was passed at consent.
Okay. Well, that's good. Ann, do you have a report for us this evening?
I think that's good enough for now.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Ann.
Yeah.
Okay. Next, we have the Community Recovery Fund Advisory Committee. Dan Klein, Chair.
Good, something non-controversial.
Yeah, right.
So let's see, we met yesterday and we got some updates on contracts and that kind of background administrative work, and that's all going very smoothly, just as it's been going all along. Our staff is doing a really excellent job on that. MRB Group, our consultant, are also doing all the things they need to do. That whole part's going very smoothly. Next thing, we took up the big question of Second Wind Cottages application. They had, to remind everyone, they had put in an application originally, and we had sort of approved it, but not officially, because they needed to do their seeker paperwork, their state environmental quality review paperwork, and that was going to take some time, and we are not allowed to approve a project that hasn't completed that work yet. So we had set the money aside, but we had not officially awarded the project. In the meantime, the town of Newfield enacted a moratorium on campgrounds that would have stopped Second Wind's project from continuing. So Second Wind modified their application and sent that to us and asked if we would accept their new application. So that was a question we took up, and we did not accept their new application by a vote of 2 to 4. We rejected the idea that they could substitute their application for the original. So that is where it stands as of this moment. It is likely that coming down the pike, we will be presented with a resolution to take the money that we had previously allocated, $510,000, and redistribute it to other projects. So if that were to happen, then the Community Recovery Fund Advisory Committee will need to meet again to determine how to redistribute that money, because we don't have a process in place for that. Originally, we had planned on meeting quarterly, but because we might have this extra work to do, we have sent a tentative meeting just for 1 month from now in order to tackle that question. So that meeting is scheduled for Monday, April 3rd at 10:30. I hope I explained the situation well. It's a little complicated, and I'll be happy to answer questions if I can.
Questions or comments for Dan Klein? Okay. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
See here. Next up, we have Budget, Capital, and Personnel Committee. Deborah Dawson, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As Drew previewed, we are going to have a riveting meeting next Monday from 3 to 5. We will be hearing from Drew the fund balance issues that were raised in Moody's ratings review of the county's credit rating. I've already discussed those with Drew, and I thought it was quite surprising and quite educational. We will also be beginning our discussion of how we could improve the budget process so that we as legislators can bring our preferences and recommendations for policy initiatives and expanded programs to Lisa early in the budget process so that they can be accounted for by department heads well in advance. And finally, we will be passing, I hope, a resolution that was recommended by NISAC and discussed at some length in our Standing Committee on Taxation and Finance regarding the in-rem foreclosure changes that were included in the Article 7 legislation portion of the governor's budget. So stay tuned for more on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. Any questions or comments for Deb? Okay. Workforce Diversity and Inclusion Committee, Veronica Pillar, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Workforce Diversity and Inclusion Committee met on, I forgot the date, but the last Wednesday in February, and we mostly talked about goals for the year, which I'm happy to share more about if anyone's interested. I want to thank Ruby for contributing heavily to that discussion. And our next meeting is going to be on Wednesday, April 26th. Reminder, we're meeting every other month at 3:30 p.m. or possibly at 3 p.m. to be determined.
Any questions for Veronica Pillar? Next is the Public Safety Committee, Rich John, Chair.
Thank you, Shauna. The Public Safety Committee has not met since our last meeting. We will be meeting on March 16th at 3 o'clock here in Chambers. The only other item I wanted to report on, just our jail statistics. We're at 58 with 6 board outs. So we are still carrying a higher number. Hopefully with the schedule of trials going on in the county court, that number should be going down. They have a steady state of trials all the way through July, I believe. So we'll keep watching it.
Thank you, Rich. Any questions or comments for Rich? Okay. Next is the Health and Human Services Committee, Dan Klein, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a little report I would like to deliver and then move on to my resolution.
Great.
The Health and Human Services Committee met on February 22nd. We had a presentation from Dr. Martin Stallone, the CEO of Cayuga Health Systems, about the COVID testing systems in Tompkins County. The county partially subsidized testing up through December 31st, 2022. I would rarely use the word thrilling to describe a committee meeting, but that is the word that keeps coming to mind for me. We saw a timeline of events that both brought back the bad memories of the pandemic events, but also told the story of Tompkins County's outstanding efforts to respond to this disease. I recommend watching the first 30 minutes or so of the meeting, and I have a few points that I would like to highlight. Almost 2 million tests have been given to Tompkins County residents. County funding paid for more than 75,000 COVID tests to residents who had no other funding source to pay for those tests. Our testing rate was 29%. The next closest county was at 9%. By using a statistical analysis, there is an estimate that 181 lives were saved in Tompkins County because of the testing program, which is the highest number in New York State. We also tested about 1 million people from out of the county. The surrounding counties had lower death rates than the state average, so it is possible that our program had a halo effect on Cortland and Schuyler counties and possibly others. Hospitalization rates for COVID peaked at about between 30 and 40 patients a day here. We may be the only hospital in New York State who did not divert patients to other hospitals, a practice that is done when there's basically no more room at the hospital because of all the COVID patients there. Dr. Stallone used the word Herculean several times to describe the efforts that happened in Tompkins County. I think that is a fitting word to describe what was accomplished by Cayuga Health Systems, county administration, Tompkins Whole Health, and probably others that I'm not aware of. Right after our committee meeting, I went to a retirement party for one of our longtime employees. At this event, there were 2 nurses from Whole Health who spent most of the pandemic working long days, doing contact tracing, and they were telling me stories where they worked 13 days in a row. And it was a reminder for me of the special thanks that we owe these nurses and the other county employees who stepped in to go above and beyond for the public good. Also at this committee meeting, we had a discussion with the City of Ithaca, who asked to be reimbursed for $4,553 for the 47 tons of waste cleaned up from some of the encampments. We heard about the developing city plans to incentivize camping in one area and disincentivizing it in others. We heard a little bit about it from tonight from George, and there's more to come, as we heard. There's 2 more things I would relate from our discussion with the city. I would characterize the committee as mixed on whether or not we would be likely to fund further efforts. Some people said they would, some people seemed disinclined, some people didn't speak at all on the subject. Part of what the city will be working on is an estimate of how much more cleanup they plan to do. They gave us some very rough numbers of how much garbage they think is out there, so they could be off by quite a bit, but this is the numbers we have to work with right now. And I added that up, comes out to about 500 more tons of debris out there. That would cost $50,000 to dispose of. I think it's important for everyone to understand about the finances of this. We charge $100 a ton to bring material to our facility. We are then charged about $67 per ton to haul it and to dump it in a landfill. Okay, so we charge 100, we're charged 67 to take it away. So that's a direct cost to us for making this accommodation for the city. And then the rest of the money that we charge goes towards staff time and towards capital debt service. So that was all an introduction to the resolution, which I will now move. So I'd like to move Resolution M, appropriation from contingent fund, solid waste disposal fees for encampment site cleanup.
Seconded by Deb Dawson. Would you like to talk to the resolution, Dan?
I think I've done enough. Thank you.
Okay. Mike Sigler and then Greg Mezzi.
I don't want to make this like a formal requirement of the city for them to get this money. I just would like to see the job kind of finished. And I don't mean like the whole job, but like they cleaned up the area across from where the Chamber of Commerce is going to be. And they did a good job. They took, tons and tons away.
Literally.
But there's still, like, they didn't finish, It was like, there's still trash there. And it's like, I would just think you'd want it to finish. It's like you have that sense of, okay, that's done. It'll get messy again, but at least we've started from a blank slate. And I may call it the blank slate bill. There you go. But I would just like to see that happen. And I know they're saying, well, it's been cleaned up. And it's like, yeah, I mean, the majority of it has been, but there's still there's a good amount of trash there. So anyway, that's just something.
Mike, I'll write that down, and if this topic comes up, I'm serious, and if it comes up again, I'll make sure they have heard that.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Greg Mezzi, Deborah Dawson, Randy Brown.
And I do always find your reports riveting, or whatever the term du jour was. I appreciate the thoroughness. How many? So this 4,500 represents how many tons?
47.
47 at the $67 a ton, or at the $100 a ton?
It's the $100. So it's $100 a ton. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess my question here is, why are we charging ourselves $100 a ton when we maybe could charge ourselves the $67 a ton, which is I don't want to say the true cost, but the hard cost to dispose of that waste, as opposed to paying our own staff and then also paying into capital and other things. I guess my question would be, why wouldn't we look at it as like the true disposal fee rather than the retail price?
So let me try this. I'm not sure if this is going to answer your question. They paid the money already. The city paid the money to us, and now they're asking to be reimbursed. So they had to pay the full fee. There's no way we could discount them at the gate. Does that address it?
Yes. I guess my next follow-up question is, if we are going to support this effort in some way moving forward, is there a way to charge them a different rate at the gate for this type of cleanup?
I'm pretty sure there is a policy on the books. I haven't actually seen it. I guess I should see it. But if anybody else can speak to it with more detail.
Lisa?
Sorry, the policy says that we cannot discount. That's my understanding. But
That's the way Barbara explained it in great detail, that we cannot charge a discount.
And this is our policy that we set? Or is this like a state or legal policy that we have to follow?
It's the policy set through the Recycling and Materials Management Division.
Okay. So we could modify that policy if we so chose, if there in fact is going to be 500 tons of trash coming through our facility.
I would need to consult with Barb on that, and I'm not sure.
Okay.
Okay, I have Deborah Dawson, Randy Brown, and Ann Corman.
I would like to move an amendment to this, that we would share the expense with the city and pay 50% of what was charged.
I'll second that.
Okay, so that's on the floor now. Mike Lane?
Yeah, I wouldn't support that. I think when certainly the representative from the city was in and we talked about this, we gave the impression that at least for this initial effort, we would be serious about doing something about the fees, reimbursing them for them. I don't think we should change this. I don't think we should discount our fees at the Solid Waste Center. And I just think we ought to do this one. If they want to do anything more, I think it should open up a whole brand new discussion.
So I will just add that whenever we had the conversation, the whole idea was that they were going to give us some notice, and notice included about 48 hours. And whenever George called, I told him that I didn't know what our legislature would vote for. I said, my thought is that we would probably, perhaps go in halfsies. And he said that was fine at that point. And then he said that they are going to go ahead, and 2 days later, they would do the garbage pickup. The one thing that I said very early on was I need to know that there's a plan in place so that the trash doesn't just keep accumulating. And that, for me, has never come forward. So, Deborah Dawson?
Yeah, I wasn't aware that we ever represented that we were going to pay the full freight. I thought it was a matter that was up for negotiation.
It absolutely is.
And secondly, Mike, my concern is that if we pay 100% of this now, and we're suddenly hit with 500 additional tons, that's a substantial amount of money. I don't want to set a precedent here that we're going to pay it all.
That's what I'm saying. We do it now in full, but we don't do it necessarily in the future.
I don't know how you draw that line. I don't see a basis for drawing that line, but I'm only one vote of 14.
It took special legislation, special resolution from this legislature to agree to this.
So we have special resolutions and we're inconsistent.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, Rich, John, and Ann Corman?
I would favor us covering this cost as it's stated in the current resolution. With that said, you know, if we're going to move forward, I do believe we need to reach some general accommodation with the city on how we're going to proceed from here. You know, the city contributed all of the labor, it was their trucks. We're really just talking about the tipping fees, is my understanding. So they have real cost in this as well. But there's benefit to both the city and the county to getting the rest of this garbage out of this area. And so I don't want to let this serve as a barrier to us moving forward. I also think that this dovetails with what hopefully we're going to have discussions about, is how did the city and the county work together to really change the environment in a larger sense with these encampments. And I'd like us to start off on the right foot if we can. If the votes are, you know, we'll pay 50%, that's okay. But I think I would prefer us, for this initial resolution, paying what we're going to pay. But perhaps we could send a message along with that saying, we need to have further discussion here. How do we deal with the next 500 tons or whatever it is? Thanks.
Ann Corman, Randy Brown.
I definitely support paying 50% for this amount that that the city has had to pay for right now. And also, I would support what others have said is asking the city to come to us, you know, and work something out, you know, whether it's to committee or something, but some sense versus, you know, just we're getting this 4,000 something and then what's it going to be later? We don't know. So how can we plan? I mean, we have a tight budget. We can't just manufacture money, right, Norma Jane? So we can't just, you know, keep coming up with money. I mean, we have to pay this from somewhere. So I feel good about 50%, and then we're setting a precedent that and that's not even saying that we're going to pay 50%, but we need to work something out and have a plan. I mean, just as was said before, have them come to us. We're not just going to give money for something that we haven't negotiated with them. And if people are requesting a plan or the next resolution might be a top dollar, like we'll pay 50% up to here, and that way they know too. But we have to, I think, negotiate something. And I think if we paid 100%, too, what is this saying to other municipalities or organizations that, hey, they can come and ask because the city had 100%, why couldn't we? And I'm glad it sounds like at least the people that have spoken are not wanting to discount the fee, because just the same as at the airport, we wouldn't say, well, geez, let's give somebody a discount at the airport because of whatever. They have to, there's a lot to keep the lights on and keep it going. So, and those are both, what's the term for them? They're both independent organizations. What are they? Enterprise units, and they have to fund themselves. So, but I appreciate, you know, trying to look at that. Can we give them something? And I would give them 50% of this and then say, let's talk.
Randy Brown, and then Travis Brooks.
I support paying the full amount. I think that that whole area is a health hazard. If the city didn't do it, I think the county eventually would and then we'd have to collect our money, which would be even more of a problem. So I really appreciate the city stepping up and doing it. They need to do it all. And let's not forget that all these people in the city are also county residents that pay county taxes. So we're I think this is an opportunity for us to say that we're going to work with the city. We need to focus on the same issues. They've got easily $4,000 in labor and whatnot cleaning this up. So they're already paying half, in my opinion. So.
Travis Brooks.
There's two different issues. There's what happens in the future with this area, and I think that's a separate conversation, and is what just happened. I do recall us saying that, we were going to hold the city accountable if they didn't do something soon. We talked about some pretty strict measures in order to accomplish that. Maybe they jumped the gun and rushed to do this before we had an agreement in place, but people have stated the fact that the labor costs just as much, maybe more, than the garbage. I think we take care of it one time, and that's it. We had George earlier talk about the $100,000 from each thing, and we were going to do this. Like, there has to be some conversations about what we're going to do together, and it is what it is this time. The work is done, and I think we should just pay it and have a very real conversation about what happens moving forward.
Okay. Lisa?
I wanted to respond to Greg's question from earlier. We've got some intel here because we're currently working on the solid waste fee structure. So based on county law, because solid waste is an enterprise unit and they set fees based on particular classes, they cannot change those fees randomly or, for a particular purpose. That once the fee is set, it must stay as is. So thank you, Norma, for that.
I knew she had the answer.
Can I ask a very quick follow-up question to that? Do we charge, let's say we were the ones that had to clean it up. Do we internally charge a department or a budget item that amount? Okay, I just wanted to understand how it works for everybody's education and mine included. Thank you.
Thank you. We all learned.
Okay. So let's vote on the amendment to, Lee Shurtleff.
More question maybe for Lisa. Why is it coming out of contingency rather than interdepartmental accounts? Were the funds paid from the city and we're reimbursing them or giving them back? That's the step we were following. But why is it coming from contingency versus coming back out of an account, revenue account within solid waste?
Solid waste would be reimbursing it. No, that wouldn't work.
Cost them money to do this operation.
Cost them money, but it costs us money just the same. Okay. So we're keeping solid waste whole through this.
Yes. Because they're an enterprise fund.
Yes.
And taking the monies out of our contingency fund. I want to make that clear that that's what the steps we're following, that the city did pay, but we're giving the city the money back and we're taking it out of our savings account to do so. Thank you.
Okay, so there's an amendment on the floor to pay for half of the expense for this first dump. Any other questions or comments? Okay, let's vote on the amendment. Those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That passes. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. It's 8-6. That amendment passes. And we're back to the original resolution with the amendment.
Have these amendment, as you call it.
Okay. Any conversation? I do have some people remaining on the list. I have a lot of
I'm good.
Notes here. We have Randy Brown and Corman.
I'm good.
Mike Sigler?
Oh, I guess my question now is if the city comes back and says, no, we don't want to pay that half.
They already paid it.
You mean they already paid it?
They paid it. This was to reimburse them.
No, but I mean for the future cleanup.
Their property.
Well, it was their property before, and they didn't want to pay for it. Are we as a legislature going to say, okay, that property will just stay the way it is?
I think at that point, we're going to have to talk about enforcement, because we've had the conversation that the property needs to start cleaning up. And if it doesn't, then we're going to have a different conversation.
Okay, enforcement by, I don't want to, I mean, I'm sorry.
It would be the Department of Health.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
The Department of Whole Health. Sorry.
Deb, you had something to say. Is that how you see it as well, or?
Well, I'm having difficulty understanding why we're so willing, given the urgency of this problem, to overlook the irresponsibility of the city over time. They have allowed this problem to continue and continue and continue. And while I realize it affects all of us, I just don't feel like we ought to be stepping in and cleaning it all up or taking the financial hit for it. I mean, it's like if you were raising your children and they were financially irresponsible and charged up, thousands on your credit card, would you just walk in and clean it up? There has to be some responsibility for allowing this situation to last as long as it has. And that responsibility is not one that I see as a county responsibility.
So I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole, because I know we can have a very long debate about county and city and everything else. And I want to keep it framed towards the resolution. I will have a time check. It's 7:37. We were kind of on track for an early-ish meeting. I was really fond of that idea, tucking my son into bed this evening.
Power, what can I say?
And then we, Sigler and Dawson go at it, and, it just goes to hell after that. So let's see here. Rich, John, and then Veronica, if we could keep it short so we can vote on this.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. And Deborah, I agree with you that you look at this and you say, well, the city should just do its job. And the problem is that this has been a very long time in the creation. And what I've seen in the city is a real serious reevaluation going on, with common council members stepping up and saying, we have to rethink how we're addressing this issue. And that has been really, really hard. I'm really impressed that they've taken the steps that they've taken, because there was total intransigence for a period of years on this issue, and it does appear the door is opening. I recognize everything you say. At the same time, I think we should be trying to figure out how do we make this process continue. And I do not want us to be in an adversarial position from the city here if there's a way to avoid that. That's not excusing any past behavior, but I think looking forward, this is the better course.
Veronica?
Thank you. I just had one last technical clarifying question on the resolution. So even though it keeps talking about waiving fees, but just to be clear, no fee is actually being waived. The fee was paid. It's just that the county, not solid waste, is giving money to the city. Okay.
So that should be changed to reimbursed. Yeah, maybe we could change the wording to reimbursed.
Okay. Is that friendly to the mover and seconder?
Give me just a moment,
Okay,
please.
sure.
To reimburse the fees. Sure.
Is that friendly?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So how's it going to read, Madam Chairman?
Resolved on recommendation of the Health and Human Services Committee that the Tompkins County Legislature authorize the reimbursement of 1/2 of the solid waste disposal fees of trash in the amount of $2,276.50. incurred following the cleanup in the unsanctioned encampment site performed by the city of Ithaca.
Greg, Mezzi?
We done with that?
Line 6 will need to be changed too, but
Okay. Greg?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to reconsider.
You're using your book?
Yeah, thank you. I'm using my big book and my little book. I think I made a mistake. I think it's important for us to take a leadership role, and I don't want to go down a precedent-setting path, because I do think it takes a partnership, and I do think we're often left holding the bag on many issues for the city, right? The library on Sundays, certain other things that they pass off to us. But I think this has to be a priority for us, and I don't know why in the moment I did, but I would like to make a motion to reconsider cutting the fee in half. And because I did vote in the affirmative, I can make that motion, and it just needs to be seconded by any member of the committee to open that back up.
Okay, seconded by Randy Brown.
So you're going to reopen it to pay the whole fee?
Correct.
And did you get this from Robert's Rules of Order?
I did.
It's fantastic that you're using that book.
Paying off.
Proud.
The brief one was actually more helpful than the big one.
It's a proud day for us all.
It's very hard finding things in the big one.
There
Yeah.
will be a test.
Already-
That's the test.
Who regrets giving that book out now?
Okay, so we're going to vote on the amendment again.
Can I ask we do a roll call?
first we have to vote to reconsider.
Oh, vote to reconsider. Okay, all those, you want to do it, that roll call?
Excuse me?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure we have everything right, because we don't usually do this. Do we need more than 8 votes? Can anyone check real quick? It's
We need the 8 votes.
And
It's
it's
the majority.
just 8, and it's debatable? Yep. Okay, just checking, because we don't hardly ever do this.
No, it's not debatable. The
Not
motion to
debatable.
reconsider is not debatable.
But when we go back.
You can
Main motion again.
The first vote would be to reconsider.
reconsider.
Right.
Okay. All those in favor for the vote to reconsider, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Lee, do you have your hand up? Nope, okay. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's 11. I'm not, and those against? That's 3. Okay, that passes. The amendment is on the floor again. Any conversation about that? Okay, we're going to have to move the amendment again. Can I have a mover for the amendment? Deborah Dawson. Can I have a seconder, please? Randy Brown. And this is to bring the amendment back.
Oh, this is to vote on the amendment. The last vote was to reconsider.
Right. So can I add, so if this vote fails, the resolution would stand as originally proposed.
Yes.
So a vote in no is a vote in favor of paying the full amount. An affirmative vote is paying half.
Right.
I'm confused. So if we say no.
It's just like we went back to as if the last 10 minutes never happened.
Yes.
So we're voting to pay the full amount now.
No, we're voting on my proposal that we only pay half.
We're voting on the amendment again, essentially.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Any comments, questions, conversation? Yep.
So then a vote yes is on this amendment would be towards paying 50%. And a vote no would be no to the amendment. Okay.
Amanda Champion?
I'm going to still vote the way I voted before, but I voted yes to reconsider because that was very good. You did a very good job. And that was impressive. And that's why we got the book, so people can change their mind and make new decisions. I think it was very effective.
Thank you.
You're rewarding good behavior. Yes. It's good. Okay. Ann Corman?
So I'm still going to vote yes on the amendment for 50%. Just trying to remember back any conversations that I can remember, and I know people have had other conversations with people from the city. I know believe I had said before, if it's a couple $1,000s, you know, probably we could pay that. We're looking at 4,000 something plus and up to $50,000. To me, that's different. So that's why in the way I look at it is what we're doing now could be setting the precedent for going forward. So if we're wanting, I mean, that's what the conversation was, like we'd like them to clean it all up. So if we're looking at $50,000, then I'd like to start off by paying half. And I'm not saying we would continue to pay half, but I would like to, 4,000 is different than a couple $1,000s, and that's where I stand.
Okay, I have Deborah Dawson, Greg Mezzi, and I'm going to hop in real quick.
Okay. This is how precedent works. It's not a whole separate conversation. Because to treat it as if it's a whole separate conversation, what you're saying is, well, I'll pay you this much, but if it's going to cost a lot more, then, you know, I don't think it's worth it. We either are willing to take the whole hit for years of irresponsibility on the city's part, or we're willing to share half and half because we recognize that it's in both our interests to clean it up. I have a lot of trouble with the notion that if it's cheap, I'll pay it all, but if it's more expensive, then I have to draw a line somewhere. I mean, to me, it's the principle of the thing. It may be different for you, but I don't think it's a different conversation. It isn't a different conversation to me. Yep.
Greg Mezzi.
Yeah, again, apologies for the exercise, but I was just sort of sitting here kicking myself. This is a county issue. This is a city issue. And I've made the comment when I talked about second wind, right? It being a Newfield issue too, right? This is an issue that requires every one of us to be a part of the solution. I think precedent comes on how we vote in the future. I think we can support this to the full amount. I think we've had contentious relationship with the city, and I want to place a lot of blame on them. I want to place a lot of blame on certain actions and decisions. But I also think too that there is an element of the county that we have to take some level of responsibility for not addressing the homelessness issue sooner within our community. I think this is $4,500 is sort of, Lee had commented, to me it's $4,500. I think we need to have a plan moving forward. But I do think we have a community within our community that reached out to us and asked for support in solving this issue. I give them kudos for taking steps, and I think personally I let a little bit of my frustration with the city and how they've operated and addressed this issue get in the way and sort of cloud my judgment on how we should be a part of the solution. So that's why I asked to have this reconsidered, and I hope others will support paying the full amount at this point.
Okay. So I'm still going to vote to pay half. If it ends up failing, then I will probably vote to do a one and done. If it comes back and they come back and ask for $25,000 or $50,000 or however much they ask for, then I would suggest us using part of that $100,000 that we've allocated for homelessness to be used for that. Because however much we're going to give, they're going to take. And the fact that this was done without us having an agreement because they wanted it to be on their timeline, I don't think is okay. I mean, I think if they were truly a partner, you work with partners, you have conversations. You don't just give them 24 hours, 48 hours. George came in here tonight. I'm grateful he comes in every month, but the reality is they're planning the way that they want to spend our money. And that's not fair because we need to have, we're shareholders, we're stakeholders. They want to give us the bill, and we should have a say in that. So, yeah, I mean, I would suggest if they continue to do the dump runs, that we use part of that money that we've allocated for that type of thing. Mike Lane.
I'm going to pass.
Okay. We are voting on the amendment to pay half. And all those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2. You were thinking about it.
I was.
3, 4, 5, and I'm 6. All those against the amendment? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, that fails. The amendment fails. We're back to the original resolution as written. Any comments, questions? Mike Sigler?
I just want to point that everything I said took less time than this.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
I don't know,
Okay.
it's close.
Okay. All those in favor of the resolution as written, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. I see 13, 12 hands up. I'll be a hand up as well. 13, all those against, please raise your hand. 1, Deborah. So that is going to pass 13-1. Dan Klein?
So if they come back for another round and more discussions, I will convey to them that one member of the legislature expressed that he would like to make sure the cleanup is done more completely. I will also convey, maybe not 100%, but most people here felt like this was not precedent setting and that it's going to be a case-by-case basis. I think that's pretty fair, and I will convey that. And then just wanted to say that our next committee meeting is March 1st, March 20th, the first day of spring.
Okay. Ann Corman?
This is what I thought I heard, but maybe it was just me talking, and that's what I heard. But that I would like there to be a plan versus a case-by-case basis.
Randy Brown?
I will convey that.
I'd just like to add something from the Health and Human Services Committee meeting with Mr. Martin, is it Stallone?
Martin
Yep. It was a great presentation and very interesting. There was only one time in the whole series of COVID where they thought they might have to ship patients to other hospitals, but it was a 12-hour period, and so that's how close it got. I asked him about respirators and if we had issues with respirators, and this county did not. Matter of fact, we shipped respirators to other counties or downstate primarily where they needed them. I think I brought this up before, it'd be very helpful to kind of do a deconstruct of what happened. And I won't be more clear on that. I'll put it in writing. So thanks.
Thanks, Randy. Deb Dawson and Rich John?
Randy, I think what you're suggesting is a debriefing.
Yes.
And I think, given what I'm reading in the national press, if we actually did that, we might be the only county in the United States who actually made an effort to learn something from what happened. I'm perfectly willing to go forward with that. Yeah.
Rich John?
Just, and I'm cognizant that we need to keep this meeting moving, but I had a memory that during the pandemic of walking down my street to State Street and watching as 2 buses of medical personnel went down to New York City, and there were people all up and down State Street clapping. It was such a moment, and I'd forgotten about it until just now, but Tompkins County and Hugo Medical Center did some really good stuff, so.
Lee Shurtleff?
If there were to be a debriefing and a report, I'd certainly like to see the financial side of it and the dollars that came back into the county and a breakdown of where they went, because I think this funding that supported Cayuga Medical Effort had a pass-through here of some $3 million.
FEMA, yeah.
And I can tell you a local organization in my district had an expense for testing of a not-for-profit of $170,000 and was on the hook for that, and was able to apply to FEMA and had a rapid turnaround. So there's some other influx of money that came in to support this, but that testing dollars that were realized by this one organization were substantially more than what the county provided. And so it's interesting. It's a multi-million-dollar effort that went on, and it clearly wasn't just the county supporting the uninsured and those that were in need of assistance. There were a lot of private healthcare dollars that were into that mix as well. So it'd be interesting just to see what that total analysis and cost would be.
Thank you, Lee. Dan, do you have anything else for us tonight?
Don't, thank you.
Okay. Housing and Economic Development Committee, Greg Muzzy, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Our next meeting, we moved due to the NISAC conference, will be Thursday, March 9th from 3 to 5 p.m. here in Chambers. On the agenda, we'll have an update from the IAED task force with a resolution to enter into an MOU based on their recommendations. An implementation of the restructuring of the Division of Employment and Training, a few other state advocacy legislation recommendations. We'll look at the ACOD grants and much more, depending on what the city's response is to our invitation for either today or the April 5th meeting, or sorry, for either the 9th or the April 5th meeting. Everybody should also have received from Sarah Wisdorf, the Executive Officer of the Ithaca Board of Realtors, an invitation to their legislative luncheon, which is March 24th from 12 to 2 at the Moakley House. If they didn't, I'm happy to share it. It may have gone to your political email and not your county email, depending. I know mine got lost in translation. I'll circulate this to everybody, but they hope to get folks together from the Ithaca Board of Realtors to talk about trends they're seeing in the local market, what they've experienced, what they have to look forward to, and it'll be a discussion between local elected municipal leaders, zoning and economic development officials, school district and business representatives. Sarah has also agreed to come to our April 5th meeting of HED and give an update on the housing market from the real estate perspective. And then also Paul Rossi, Government Affairs from NYSAR, will also, New York State Association of Realtors, will also hopefully be joining us as well. So just wanted to give that update. I'll send this invitation around now if folks didn't receive it.
Boy, we miss Paul Rossi. He was like the only person who used to come and say nice things about us.
He's watching. He's watching us.
He was a fan favorite.
Well, I will say, walking around
Hey, Paul, we love you. We miss you.
I will say, walking around NISAC, I stopped at numerous booths, and people would say, "Oh, Tompkins County, you guys are great," which was kind of nice.
Yeah.
We never hear that from our own constituents.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, any questions for Greg or comments? Okay, next up, Facilities and Infrastructure Committee, Mike Lane, Chair.
Now, we'll meet again on Thursday the 16th at 9 o'clock. Early notice, our May meeting is going to be rescheduled because of training that's going to be going on for our legislative staff. Something I want to talk about certainly at our next regular meeting is the amount of graffiti that we've all of a sudden seen on, particularly the attorney building on North Tioga Street, but also Building C and something else. It's burgeoned the last 2 or 3 weeks. I don't know whether the police department has been made aware of this. I don't know whether our cameras are going to be any help in trying to track down who are the perpetrators of this, but we can't let this go on. Something's got to be done about that. I don't know what. I'm not an expert at that. Maybe we should call the MTA in New York City and find out what they do about their graffiti on their subway cars. And the last thing I'll just say is that the Red House still stands.
Long live the Red House.
Any questions or comments for Mike? Okay. Thank you, Mike. Government Operations Committee, Amanda Champion, Chair.
Thank you very much. I don't really have much of a report. We met last week. It was a somewhat short meeting. We had a good discussion about Robert's rules, as you know, already put into effect tonight as in a very riveting way. Yeah, and we did some resolutions, which we have here, and I can go into those. Okay, so we pulled Resolution I because we also pulled it at the we have to change part of it. It includes, these are the policies. It includes policy 01-29 standards of conduct, but that has already been abolished in the past, so we don't need to abolish it again. So essentially, we're taking that out of the title, and we're not voting on that tonight. It's already been done. So this resolution is the resolution to update Administrative Policy Manual 02-04, hiring and processing new employees, and 04-08, workers' compensation, ID 11482.
Can I have a seconder, please? Seconded by Mike Lane.
And yeah, just policies. It also went through BCP. If there's questions, we can answer them.
Deborah Dawson?
Yeah, I would just say that if you're removing the standards of conduct policy, you would also need to remove lines 8 and 9.
On the resolution?
On the resolution itself.
Well, I'll leave that to the clerks. I don't even know what page.
It's on packet page 20.
So Deborah, can you say that change?
Oh, yeah.
We would just be deleting lines 8 and 9.
That whereas that lists it as one of the policies.
Is that friendly to the mover and seconder?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and in the resolved as well.
And yeah, well, we also have to remove line 22.
Okay. We've got it. Thank you. Any questions or comments in regards to the resolution? Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, and then there's Resolution J, acceptance of ARC grant funds to develop the Tompkins County Strategic Operations Plan, ID 11504. And I will move that. Randy, hold it.
Okay, Randy Brown seconds. Or do you have a question, Randy? You want to second it?
I did. So I was just, I read it and I understand what's going on. We're getting money, which is great. But could somebody talk to more about this, what this really means?
Yeah, wait, I just want to clarify. Randy, did you want to second the resolution? Okay, great, thank you.
Go ahead.
Sure. So this is funding that we became notified through the county through our Southern Tier 8 staff identified that this funding was being made available to several counties in our region for the purposes of strategic operations plans or county comprehensive plans. We have a county comprehensive plan, but we've not had a strategic operations plan. It's something that we've talked about wanting to set the strategic direction for the county and how we allocate resources and so forth. So we put forth an application for these funds. It's $160,000. And we will be putting that amount in kind in terms of staff time. They are requiring that as local match, and we're able to do that. And it will entail working together with the legislature, department heads, staff, and engaged community stakeholders to set strategic goals and direction for the county. We'll be working with a consultant or contractor who is versed in guiding counties through a strategic planning process. In anticipation of this grant, which we thought was going to be a very quick turnaround time, we had already issued an RFP. The grant came much later than that, so we've already reviewed consultants to assist us in this. So we're ready to kind of hit the ground running.
Do we have the staff in place now, or do we have to hire people?
No, we have the staff in place now.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, let's vote on the resolution. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. Thank you.
I don't have anything else.
Okay. Any individual member filed resolutions? I see none. If we could vote on the minutes of the previous meeting, February 21st, 2023, moved by Deborah Dawson, seconded by Veronica Pillar. Any changes, comments, corrections? I see none. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. Thank you. We will be going into executive session for two topics. First one, collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law. The second one is the employment history of a particular person. And we will not be taking action after executive session. Can I have a motion to go into executive session? Moved by Rich John, seconded by Greg Mezzi. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. Dan, are you? Okay. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Let's take a 10-minute break. And we'll come back at around 8:15.